So I'm here to talk about Ansible, a server provisioning tool, and it is very much your first step in server provisioning. So I'm going to give a quick sort of run through of how we came to discover Ansible, why we personally using it, my story that got us here, and then just go into the sort of first steps you might encounter when you're trying to pick up Ansible, just run through a few of the scripts, a few of the kind of things you use like playbooks to get you up and running, and then at the end cover a few resources, things you might want to look into if it sounds interesting. My name is Spencer, Phantom Whale on Twitter, and I work for Aconex, we are a global market leader SaaS construction industry company, and broadly speaking we sort of manage complex communication over large groups of people. Personally I work in a sort of more smaller startup app within the company. It's on Ruby on Rails stack, it's over AWS. So we're sort of DevOps, a little bit more dev, not really as much ops, but we manage our whole stack. And you know, if you're interested, we are. So, the story so far. So we were this small startup-y style app. We're only going a couple of years. We've got single server in production, single server in development, single server in testing, and that server was Ubuntu 10. We've got Ruby on Rails on it, some other stuff on it. There's our lovely production server. So yeah, we put Ruby on Rails on it, and then of course we're going to need Apache to serve that up. Then we needed Elasticsearch, do some searching with some complex configuration files. We've added some users over time and roles as well. And then of course we've got the mail server on that box, we've got cron jobs that support all that on the box, we've got SSH keys, and that's all I can remember that's on the box. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I can't remember that's on the box. So we were very much in the situation where our lead developer, we'll call him Fred, had all that in his head. And that's kind of fine. Fred was managing the box and others kind of knew a bit of what Fred knew, not everything. But Fred being a developer has three natural enemies that all developers have. Money might drag Fred away. There's always the number 73 bus problem. And mainly, Fred might just forget what happened. And we were definitely in the third category when it came around to rebuilding the box with Ubuntu 12. We tried, we put some stuff together, we didn't quite get there. We weren't starting completely from scratch. We had got some documentation, and documentation is ace, obviously. So we had a bunch of shell scripts, maybe little snippets here, a couple of manual steps as well. But broadly speaking, we thought we captured everything. And what we forgot is the first rule of development, which is that documentation is a lie. These scripts look all very well, and we'd maintain the scripts, we'd update the scripts, and we've done rolling upgrades to the box, but in reality they didn't work. And trying to go through them again, we had package conflicts, we'd miss steps out, we were doing some weird stuff with SSH which we couldn't get to repeat. So eventually we had to just kind of start afresh, rebuild a new box and hope it was close enough. So this is the problem we had. It's what Martin Fowler coins the snowflake server. It's a beautiful creature, it's wonderful, but it is utterly unique and you can never recreate it ever again. So this is what brought us on to the point of today's talk, which is server provisioning. So server provisioning, broadly speaking, as I'm sure most people in this room are aware, is setting up a box, configuring it, installing the packages you need, and configuring the roles you require to get whatever it is the server does. And as we've already discussed, there are other solutions apart from Ansible what I'll be talking about. There's Chef, which we did look at. We're a Ruby shop, so Chef appealed, but after 2 weeks of playing with knives and cookbooks and things, we hadn't really got our Elasticsearch bit up and running yet. It was a long slog, so Chef kind of got dropped. Puppet, actually most of Aconex does use Puppet, but we're Ruby guys, so we like to do a bit different. And I'd been told about this Ansible tool at one of the Rails camps here in Melbourne, and someone recommended I looked into it, so I thought, let's see what I can do with a day at that. And within a day I thought, geez, I can do a heck of a lot in a day, so I've stuck with it so far. All of these tools, broadly speaking, contain four very similar aspects to them. They're directives, which is go do this thing for me. There's a directive script, which is a list of directives, so go do all these things for me, and by the end we should have what we're after. And the master node and the slave node, so obviously Sam's talked about, you've got the Puppet master out there, and the Puppet client's talking back to the Puppet master and grabbing stuff. So all those broad elements are contained in all configuration management as well as Ansible, point of today's talk. So in Ansible, directives are called tasks. These are the basic building blocks of Ansible. You'll issue tasks like install this package, set up this user, etc., etc. And you put those tasks together in an oddly sports metaphor of a playbook. So a playbook is something you can say, you're the web server, run the web server playbook, you're now a web server, and you can run the playbook over and over again to roll out any upgrades, install any missing software. One of the selling points of Ansible is the master node. It can be your own machine. It could be a separate machine if you like, but it can just be your own machine. You just install Ansible and off you go. And the client node can be any remote server. There is no client software. There's nothing that needs to be present there. One of the things that stings you with Chef is a Ruby-based thing, so you have to have a certain version of Ruby running Chef. And then the first thing you try and do is install Ruby on Rails, and suddenly you're running two different versions of Ruby. Because that version of Ruby, and we're on a slightly older version of Ruby. So yeah, it's kind of nice, but it's clean. There's nothing there. In fact, it is just SSH is your only requirement. And maybe just a little bit of Python, but don't worry about that. You won't notice it, trust me, there's no Python, you don't see it, but it is there. And installing it on your master node or your workstations, that probably is pretty much a doddle. There's probably some homebrewy thing if you're into Macs, but otherwise it's just a apt yum or pip thing, whichever you're into. Right, and the first thing you want to do, you've got it installed, it's on your machine, very excited to play with it. You've got a thing called an inventory file, and that's going to sit in etc Ansible by default. And the inventory file is just a nice simple list, so your master node knows where all your child nodes are. Yeah, and looks something like that. So you can define this nice simple text file, you define groups in your brackets, so your web servers and databases, and you can have different groupings. So my server's both it's a web server and one is a database, but they're both are primaries. So when you're issuing your commands, you can aim them at particular servers, you can aim them at particular server groups, or you can just say, hit everything, I don't care. So once you've got your inventory file, you're ready to go. You've got Ansible, you've got an inventory file. So the first thing to look at is modules. This module is what you use to run your tasks. You're going to pick a module, and that will be the task you're aiming to run. The simplest of these is a task called ping. That literally just checks if the server can respond. So from your command line, you can run Ansible, that's the command line tool. All says get all the servers out of the inventory file and run the module ping, and what should come back is just a little JSON packet say, yeah, I've got the message, everything's working, Ansible's ready to go. If you need to go in as a different user, simple, there's more command line switches, so that will try and SSH in as Bruce on some servers and do the thing. You can do sudo to check that you can SSH in and then upgrade to sudo and run the ping command. And you can even supply a sudo user once you've gone in to go and run the command. So there's a whole bunch of switches which kind of help you go in, log in, and figure out if your servers are going to respond to you. So once you're pinging, it's kind of interesting, it doesn't do much though. It's time to run some commands. So again, just a simple command line tool, go in and reboot all the machines. You validly might want to reboot all the machines. Command's actually such a common use that actually you don't need to say -n command. If you miss that out, it knows you meant I just want to run a command. And -a is just saying this is the argument to the command module, so it's telling it what shell command to run. So you can take that and run with it. So we can run 3 different shell commands. This one will go in and add a new user, create a new group, and put the user in the group. Nice and easy setup. The only problem with this approach is if you run it again, you're going to get an error. It's going to say, I've already got this user. Well, I'm trying to add a user. And it'll tell you you've already got the group. I'm not sure if it'll complain about you trying to add the user to a group again, but you're going to get weird warnings and error messages. So this is when you're going to actually turn and start using some of Ansible's built-in modules. In this case, we've got 2 modules here, so we've used the -m flag again. We've got group and user. And they both take sort of name value pair arguments. And these will go in and they'll do broadly the same as the previous, just basic commands, but the difference here is they're idempotent. These are going to run again and again. Once the user and group are in place, they're not going to keep reappearing. Pretty much the bog standard stuff of server configuration, but this is Ansible's way of doing it. Now, one of the other great features of Ansible is the module core list. These are all in the basic Ansible install. There's no go off and get an extension here, go off there. With Chef, we found we're going off to get lots of basic cookbooks from various places, up basic services. In Ansible, this all comes straight out the box. I mean, we use file manipulation, network stuff quite a lot, source control to check out your code, the database stuff, I haven't even touched 80% of it yet, but pretty much any task you will do on your server, when we went through our fragments of documentation, we found there was already a module pretty much out there to do it, with maybe 2 or 3 exceptions. If you do bump into one of those exceptions, there's a couple of things you can do. The first one is you can kind of get DIY idempotency. There's a creates argument that you can add to a majority of commands, especially the basic command module, that says go away and run depackage Elasticsearch. We couldn't find Elasticsearch in any of the app repositories, so we just downloaded the deb and installed it. And we just said, and that will create this directory. So when you come to run it a second time, the directory's already there, it's not going to run again. Of course, actually, we then tried to upgrade it, and that doesn't quite work. But you can do creates on the jar file version it creates. And there's also a removes clause as well that works the same in reverse if you're trying to make sure something's definitely not there. And if all of that doesn't work for you, you are actually allowed to roll your own modules. Perfectly allowed, a few people have, and a lot of them get submitted back to the Ansible repo. I think they were boasting last week they're the 5th most popular repo on GitHub this year or something. And that's sort of just behind Rails and Node and other big things. And you can write them in any language, apparently. And there indeed is, I am planning to give this talk at RubyConf, hence I've put a link for Rubyists. If you're a Rubyist, it might be interesting to you. If not, just ignore it. So that was modules, a quick run through, because I think most people are familiar with the kind of commands you send down to sort of configuration management service. So playbooks is where you kind of bring all this together, and this is where Ansible's, again, kind of brings, I think, a simplicity, which sold it for many people. Personally, I've only really played with Ansible and Angus, so I don't know kind of how it does weigh up to other things. I've certainly heard of concerns with, I think Puppet in the early versions of Salt have got kind of task interdependencies, where A relies on B and B relies on C, and that works brilliantly. Then someone takes B out of the equation, and no one realizes that A now needs to rely on C because B's been pulled out of the way, and things can get lost. Whereas in Ansible, for playbooks, they're a simpler beast, and they execute in sequential order from the top down. Whether that's an advantage or disadvantage, I don't know. It works very well for us as we've got a reasonably simple setup. They're written in YAML, which is a very simple configuration language. And they use what's called Ginger 2 templating, which is a lot simpler than it sounds. It's some sort of Python-based thing. It's basically double handlebars around variables, and they get replaced. And as I say, it's intended to be this configuration, not scripting language. There are a few things where you can do if statement-y stuff and in certain conditions do this, but they're really selling it as, no, you give us your machine configuration, our modules will go away and we'll run all the commands for you. And yeah, these commands are called plays in the playbooks. So I think we have an example. This is YAML. It's kind of indented with dashes. It looks a bit Python-y, but it's not Python. If you're Rubyist, you're probably very familiar with it. For the next sort of half of the talk, I'm just going to briefly run down what these various elements are, explain roughly how they work, how they interact together, and by the end, this is going to look a heck of a lot better with some of the concepts I'm going to show you. So the first thing about playbooks is we have tasks. So we've seen them on the command line. This is how you run a task in a playbook. You can give it an optional name. That's just a throwaway string. It's going to pop up and when you're running your script, but that's all it is, just a description. And below, we're running the apt package, and here's our name value pairs we're feeding in. So this is, the arrows appear on this projector. So yeah, there's the kind of one-to-one corollary, but same back command line, it's exactly the same in the playbook. So once you've got a bunch of tasks, that's good, but after a while you'll start to want some way of keeping sort of magic numbers and symbols out of there. So there's variables which can be defined in a whole bunch of places. You can kind of just have them sitting there in your playbook. You can pop them over in your inventory in files and roles. We'll come on to some of that a bit later. So there's variables in the playbook. This is part of our Elasticsearch where we've gone to tweak the config file to make sure we've got enough memory. Here is excellently named Ginger2 templating in action with the double handlebars around the variable. And up the top, we've just said we want our heap size to be 4 gig. So that's going to go in and use the line in file module to find a certain line in our config file and make sure it's updated to have the 4 gig memory setting. So variables can also be put in your inventory, if that works for you. So we can say that dev host 1 and dev host 2 are both small, so we'd like to just give them 1 gig. We don't want big heaps, they're going to max out the memory because we're only doing just small development work on them. And you can even just assign that variable to the group itself to clean things up. So we use that for our dev machines because we have exactly a problem. There are only small instances on AWS, they only have 1.7 gig of memory, so we don't want to give them 4 gig because they fall over, as we found out. So variables, as well as going to your playbook, you can have template files. Sometimes you find a single line in your config file and replace it. It gets a bit fiddly, so you can just set up templates. So it's take this entire file, pop it onto my system, and do any variable substitution you need to while I do it. So this is the other way of managing configuration files in Ansible. Once again, plug in the variables. So you've got your tasks. You've written some variables to make them all a bit more easy to read and flexible. The next concept Ansible brings in, which you don't need, but it's very handy, is handlers. Handlers, basically, you normally attach to services. In this case, Apache. We also have one for Elasticsearch. And we have one for our database. And what you can do is at any point you're running a task, you can say, I've changed the configuration file. Apache is not going to pick that up until I've restarted it. So I'm going to notify Apache, I'd like you to restart when we finish doing all this stuff. I don't need to restart now, but get around to it by the end, that would be great. And then later in your playbook, you can declare these handlers, and in most cases they are as simple as using the service module, which obviously looks for a service of that name and ensures that it's been restarted at least once by the time you reach the end of the playbook. So yeah, handlers is another nice way, because you'll normally have 7 or 8 different tasks that all need the service to be restarted, so it's a nice way of just deferring that to the end and keeping the play pretty swift. So that actually is pretty much all we've used in our script so far. There are a couple of other slightly cleverer things which I think we'd like to make use of to dry a few more things up, but certainly 6 months in we haven't found the need to go into them yet. With the exception of this one, actually, so here we have just a bunch of packages you might need. These are packages for installing Ruby from scratch. You actually need 18 different packages, and if you start writing apt install this, apt install this, apt install this, it goes on and on. So you can use loops, and this is where you can kind of put in a variable, say apt install this package, and then just provide a list of things. So it's most commonly used for package installing. But anyway, you've got a whole list of things you want to just kind of substitute into the same command over and over. Ansible supports that. And the other thing which we kind of might need to use soon, as we've got sort of 2 different platforms we might be deploying to, is conditionals. So in this case, you can do something only when a variable is set. So awesome is true, so the shell task is going to execute and tell me my machine is awesome. Or slightly more practical and usefully, you might say, I only want to do this shutdown command on Debian-flavored systems because I know that command's not going to work on my Mac systems, I know it's not going to work on these systems. So you can have, use a conditional based on the OS family. This little magic variable there, the Ansible OS family, is one of 200, 300 odd ridiculous amounts of facts you get whenever you run an Ansible play. There is a command, I would try and run it in my terminal, but I'm sure I'd ruin everything, so I'll practice that for later. But if you run the command, it lists out all the stuff. And this is everything Ansible knows about your machine, like the memory size, the remote machine you're deploying to, of course, it knows the memory, every disk, it's got infinite seems of information about all the different OS and hardware that's available. So if you need to switch on almost any machine fact, Ansible will already have that there as a nice, easy to grab variable. And if you're using EC2 and stuff, it can add more stuff on. It can have all the EC2 meta information in there, and you can use those as well. So there's quite a powerful set of facts already available without you having to define them in groups in your own files.
Won't that shut that any Debian machine down when you run it?
That would, yes. It's not that useful, unless you really hate Debian.
Yes.
It's like, eat that Debian. So to recap, that's a very basic playbook. This will fire up against web servers. We've defined an HTTP port and a maximum number of clients. We've asked Apache to make sure it's the latest version of itself. We're going to write the config file using a template file, a J2 template file out there, which is going to substitute in those variables. Then we say once we've done that, we definitely want to restart Apache. And then slightly uselessly, we're making sure it's running, and then we're going to end up restarting it anyway. And we're going to log in and do this all remotely as root. Again, you can specify any user, any combo stuff you need.
So the J2 files, they deployed previously to Ansible, or they control that?
No, so the J2 files will be sitting locally when you run the playbook, and it will grab the file locally, substitute variables in, and then it will upload it to whatever destination you've specified and the sort of name value pairs as part of the template task.
So that path serves HTTP, but J2, that's a local one.
That's going to be a local one, yeah. Not a great example of the path, but it fitted on the slide. And I had a good example. I thought no one would notice, so I just cheek it in there now.
So can we go back to it?
Oh, of course. I assume I can. I'm useful.
So the HTTP port, the variables up there are going to be substituted as part of that template?
Yes, we'll get pulled in on the template task. Yeah. So that was doing template substitution with variables. Like I say, you can have them inline as well. If any of these name value pairs, you could have like that destination could be brought up as a variable.
Sure.
So where a lot of this, I mean, that was more than we used, like I say, for 6 months, and we're perfectly happy with the setup we have. But now I discovered roles. Roles are quite a powerful way of packaging up all these concepts together in small bite-sized units. So rather than kind of these task lists and handle lists and variable lists growing ever big, you can kind of start to go, well, this is everything about Apache, I'm going to put it there. This is everything for Ruby on Rails, I'm going to put it there. And these are roles. So like I say, they help you package up task variables, both files and templates, handlers, and any dependencies. So roles can depend on other roles when you get into use them. When you've got a role, so in this case we've got a tasks Apache YAML. We've just pulled out all our Apache tasks into its own file. It looks just like a playbook. It's the same syntax as a playbook, but it's now sitting in its own separate file away from all the other stuff. And then back in our actual main playbook, we could just include these task files. So I should explain, this isn't yet a role, this is building up to a role. This is like, so we're including the task file. So the next thing is we can pull out our handlers and put them in a separate file, and we can pull out our variables, put them in a separate file by literally copy and pasting them over, dries up our playbook, squeezes up our playbook a little bit. Why have I put that now? Oh yeah. So roles have a kind of best practice around them, a certain structure they expect to be in. So far we've taken our playbook, we've pulled out our handlers, our tasks, and our templates and our variables. We kind of put them in this directory structure because that kind of worked for us. But it turns out roles have got this idea that if you put them in the roles directory, funnily enough, and then the next directory down is by default the name of the role. So we don't have to specify anywhere anything clever, just the Apache directory is the Apache role. And then we bring all those directories underneath, and we've called everything main.yaml. And so main.yaml, once again, is convention. When this role runs, if it finds a task to main.yaml, it will run it. And that could then bring in other task YAMLs underneath, but the main is kind of the principal one. And similarly, it knows if there's a main vars, it will just bring those vars in. You don't specify them, and if there's main handlers, they're going to get pulled in. So with all this in place, having moved up pretty much everything we had before into separate files, into a certain best practice setup, when we go back to our playbook, it looks like that, which is much nicer and much simpler. So we just say on the web service, install the Apache role. So this leaves your top level playbook a lot cleaner. So once you get onto installing a real server where you've got common package, you want to do certain Debian stuff, only when you've got Debian, you want to do Apache Java Elasticsearch, Rails, Redis. We don't use Redis, but it's a cool example. Your playbook now looks a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, a lot better. This is an example here where we've actually put a conditional on a role. You can do that, same as tasks. And you can do a heck of a lot more fun and funky sort of if-then-else type stuff. But I think Ansible generally, they're trying to really discourage you having too many switches, too much. There's a lot you can manage, I think, with configuration rather than having switches and if-else type statements.
Where do variables fit into that if I needed a small So that's a small web service, say with max hosts and max clients of 50.
Right. So where do variables fit with deploying sort of many servers?
No, once you've pulled them out into roles.
Oh yeah. So again, variables, I think I mentioned it early on, actually it would be probably good to sort of feedback that information here, so I'll improve my present for next time. So at this point, yeah, you can have variables in your roles, and I think those generally, there's two ways you can have them in roles, as I discovered the other day. If you have them in the vars main YAML, they are the variable, they're there, you can't override them. That's the value you get. There's another way you can define variables and roles to say this is the default if you've forgotten to define it. So if you've not bothered to tell me max clients, let's make it 10. And then back out in your main playbook or in your inventory file, probably in your inventory file if it's certain servers, you can then say, oh, these servers max clients is 50, for these servers max clients is 100, and for these it's 200 because they're much bigger. If I go back through there, you can also, in your main directory, you can have a group vars and an instance vars directory. They don't really encourage instance vars because that's, servers shouldn't be individually unique so much. But they have a group vars folder, and you can put the name of the group.yaml and just put group variables in there, so you can keep your group variables again out of your inventory in a separate file. So we use that. We've got the small group, which is where we say all our small servers are going to have these lower taxing configurations. And in a couple of cases where we've got some weird database set up, we have actually used an instance var, just say in UAT for some reason the database needs this slightly different security. We need to figure out why and stop it doing it.
For that example right there, roles Apache, blah, how do I differentiate them with that YAML config between my QA environment, my prod environment, etc.?
So
good system?
In theory, that role is going to be the same in every environment. You're going to want Apache there in every way.
But my configuration will be different.
The configuration will probably be different, and that's variables. It's going to make them different. So you're probably going to have placeholder variables there. Like I said, I should add into the presentation, there's another folder name, which is the one for variables that are only here if you have not bothered to define them. Because I only found that last week and got horribly stung by it when our production box was running with 1 gig in Elasticsearch, and it was doing very well. But we out of memory error last week. Did a quick patch. So yeah, again, you'd be doing it in your variables, either your top level playbook or in this kind of group vars directory. You'd be saying, this is UAT server group, and in there you do not want to put hundreds and thousands of gigabytes of stuff that only the prod server is going to cope with. Right, so that is pretty much as far as you want to go, otherwise I am literally just talking through the documentation. This was very much our first step into Ansible. We finally started to get 819 roles together, quite happy with how it's looking. We've managed to roll our 1.2.12 out into production. We've even done a couple of upgrades with it, and they're a little bit scary, but that kind of worked. Yeah, sorry?
So what was to develop all, I can't remember if I didn't hear it or not, but to develop all your Ansible code then for your environments, how long did that take?
I think in a day, we've got sort of Ruby on Rails and Apache and Postgres on the day. We've got all the kind of apt package stuff present and pretty much up and running. I think most of the learning for me was around variables, just figuring out, well, I want these to have that and those to have those, so where do I hard code these? And I hadn't even discovered roles. That took a little longer to sink in. So I think it was definitely a case of the first time I did it, I'm very happy I did, just ploughed in, created a big long playbook, then realised I could pull little chunks out. But yeah, I'll tell you, within 2 days of work, I had something which was promising enough. I went, right, this is what we should be doing. Given we'd spent over a week mucking about with Chef and trying to cope with the learning curve there. And given we do only have a single server in every environment, I think it's probably the right tool for the job for us. We are aware we do keep using different tools to the rest of the company, which might occasionally annoy the rest of the company. We'll talk to the rest of the company maybe after to see how they but I think Puppet would have been too heavyweight for the single server we were using.
Did you do any kind of preliminary comparison with Puppet, or is that just looking at the list of companies doing it?
No. Either when I'd had I'd seen a couple of talks on Puppet, I'd seen the kind of way it went. I did some very basic reading. There's something I've got on the resources about. There's a guy who does, he doesn't Ansible newsletter, so I guess I should have guessed it would be quite a partisan opinion, but he did. And he did a very good, actually, completely unpartisan opinion about the various systems, Puppet Chef, Ansible and Salt, and about where he found each one's strengths and weaknesses were, and where he preferred and where he didn't. And, but no, I mean, it was, to me, where it was Ansible, and it was looking kind of light and easy to use, and there's quite a lot of people in my community who had example scripts up there, support we could get for it, where for Chef, certainly, I think we'd struggled to get some of the basics going, not found a lot of knowledge around our area. Yeah, I always had that kind of thing with Puppet was a bit opsy. As much as we think we're DevOps, we're very, very, very dev, and ops out of necessity, I suspect.
How do you populate your inventory?
So yeah, I haven't put anything into this, but originally we just did it manually by hand, which kind of worked fine when we were mucking about. When we tried to go to EC2 and all our boxes kept going down and up and changing, and we actually want to take a box offline, so we removed the DNS, and now the box isn't buying that DNS anymore. It became a little bit fiddlier. So there is out there an ec2.py script, so it's a Python script, so you have a dynamic script providing your hosts. So rather than providing a static text file, you give it a script that Ansible's going to call into, and the script goes off, runs some stuff. In this case, it obviously interrogates your EC2 settings, and then it comes back and supplies a whole bunch of auto-generated groups and auto-generated servers. So there will be, for each instance size, like M1 small, the M1 small group will be all your M1 small servers. So that's how we don't actually have a small group, we have the M1 small group and the C3 large group for our two different server sizes. But again, it gives you all of these things as either machine facts or groups, lots of variables you can play with to get all the facts and the data you need.
Cool.
But because, of course, that's all your servers, they do recommend you have an inventory file for everything but prod and an inventory file for prod. I don't know how you can do that with this dynamic script, so if you ever type Ansible all, you have to then quickly Control-C, because that includes production.
Another question regarding inventory again. If you're not allowed to use SSH keys as an authentication method, and you have to supply a username and password, and every password has to be different on every server, can you have a lookup table in Ansible to be able to have like an expect SSH login user password and stuff?
I'm not sure. I know you can do on the command line. There's sort of minus little and big K, which is needing to provide either you need to provide a key to do sudo and a key to do the SSH. So I was much about using Ansible to try and set up my own box, and because I didn't want to have my own keys, trust my own keys, I thought I'd just play around with that and type the passwords in a little bit. I'm not sure if you can do any sort of lookup table there, though. No. I think generally, the recommendation is the keys. But there's probably is a way around it. It's pretty flexible.
Do you know what kind of testing facilities there are, like unit tests and integration tests, a la Chef Spec or Test Kitchen?
And it's only SSH. Why would you just test it? Yes. No, there is a pretty big code base on GitHub. It is all open source, so I presume if you knew Python and went in there, I'm guessing that's pretty well tested. If you mean for testing your own playbooks, which I realize probably did me. No, I don't know. So far, my test has been let's run it against demonstration and see what falls over. It is a very good question, though, because obviously as we kind of go forward, it'd be nice to have a little bit more security about it. We only run it probably half a dozen times now, and each time it's a little bit, what's going to happen? We're doing it out of hours anyway, so if the prod falls over, we've got a couple of minutes to go, we'll bring it back up again. But yeah, it's not broken yet, but yeah, I think it would be nice to have a harness or something like that around it. Again, not something we've got to yet.
So you're developing against your demo environment rather than using something like Vagrant and...
That is one of the next things we would really like to do. We're only 3 devs, and one UX guy does a little bit of code and check-in. All 3 devs are on Ubuntu 12, so we rarely hit machine difference problems, so we've kind of said, we just use our own machine. But the UX guy, funnily enough, uses a Mac, and he's got to the point where he can't run his build anymore because his XML library's too high and not good gear, he doesn't like it. And he's because he doesn't develop as much, he's kind of given up trying to keep his box, because it's also his laptop he's bought in from house. So he doesn't want to start installing everything on it just to get this stuff running. So actually we were thinking Vagrant would be ideal for him and probably good for us as well. because we're bringing in more feature spec, behavior spec testing, which involves more local libraries. So I'm constantly sending an email going, guys, install Qt, or actually no, uninstall it, that's not working, do this instead. So yeah, and Ansible and Vagrant play very well together by all the posts I've read. So I'm going to quickly run through the resources that are available, all the ones I've discovered so far. But first of all, you might think Ansible sounds good, but you know, Chef and Puppet, we know Chef and Puppet. And that was my fault when I heard about it. I thought, yeah, what's this Ansible thing? But apparently, it has grown quite well. And ThoughtWorks, in their infinite wisdom, have put it on the radar. We are into trial of Ansible at the moment. And they said something quite nice about it. In the category of DevOps orchestration engines, Ansible has nearly universal acclaim in ThoughtWorks projects as useful tools and abstractions of useful over granularity. So there's a thumbs up there from them. It seems to be kind of gaining popularity, and I think, I mean, I picked it up 9-10 months ago. I think in the last 6 months, I don't know why, there's been a strange sort of exponential curve in the number of downloads, the number of people using it. So it's clearly hit some sort of wave at the moment, and it's capturing people's attention. I think one of the reasons that works is the documentation is really, really great. It's really nicely organised. It is actually at that zoom level when you go there, which is kind of friendly. It's not little, it's big text. I don't know why, that makes me feel like I'm here to learn something. And there's a great little menu down the side. I mean, I say playbooks, got the intro and all the things I've talked about. There's much more text on them, much more, it's all cross-linked. With every release, documentation gets updated every time, so it's always fresh, it's always up to date. It's 2 monthly releases, so it's quite impressive. And, you know, I think if the documentation form behind that would kill the project. So for me, that was just a fantastic resource for getting up and running. There is the Ansible Weekly Newsletter by Matt James. He wrote also a book which was Taste Test Puppet Chef Ansible Salt, which I spoke about a moment ago. And it was his kind of lead book I read that made me go, okay, this is worth trying. And the newsletter's got a whole bunch of little links, little extra things. They tell you about any up-and-coming Ansible talks. I was very excited. There were 2 in Australia. They were both mine. And there used to be Ansible Works Galaxy, but we're not Ansible Works anymore. They are rebranded. They are just Ansible now. So there is Ansible Galaxy. So I believe this, I haven't really made much use of it. I haven't looked around it much. Because I guess ironically, this is exactly the thing I found with Puppet that confused me. There was this third-party repo of stuff and what's the good, what's the bad stuff. But they have set up Ansible Galaxy. I guess this is for people to share roles around with. So if you've written a really good Apache role that's going to be generically useful for lots of people, I guess the idea is this is where you can put it up, you can serve it up and share it out. It is beta at the moment, but quite a lot of people are getting on board with that, and there's quite a lot of chat about it. So that might be something we check out and see if someone's written much better packages than me, which
there's a lot of rubbish in there.
oh, is it? No, forget that.
Probably written.
I wouldn't bother with that.
Maybe you could add.
I've been looking to kill the odd slide, you know, that one's gone now, forget it.
Sure, it'll get better.
And I believe that's it. Thank you very much. Is there any more? I think we did the questions earlier. Are there any more questions? So. Oh, okay.
It's a bit off topic, but I signed up for New Relic and didn't get a free t-shirt. What did I do wrong?
You need to talk to the saleswoman, because we were in New Relic for ages, and it's all like free t-shirts for new people. Go, what about the old people? Do you want to talk about upgrading your package? Yeah, all right, blah, 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 blah. Are you interested? No. Do you want that? No. How many servers have you got? 1. Would you like a big package? Don't need it. Shall I send you t-shirts? Yeah. 2 t-shirts. There you go, that's how you do it. I was going to tell Ansible I'm doing a talk about the Ruby conference if you get some free t-shirts. Nothing.
The sticker's coming to the next Infracoders. The cool
I am slightly unstickered at the moment. So it's a bit of a shame point. So yeah, more stickers good.
One more question?
Done any Ansible to non-Unix machines, basically?
No, they're all being Ubuntu 12 so far.
It's one of the key things I love about it is you can, I don't know how people do their load balancer devices with Puppet or Chef. You can't run agents on them, but you know they work. Ansible works a tree on a Citrix load balancer or a Netscaler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cisco.
Because again, as long as you can SSH in, as long as it's got a very, I think it's 2.5 Python it needs, which is almost any machine you'll find now, Linux sort of based machine you'll find. It runs fine.
And even if you don't have Python, you can still run direct commands to control stuff.
I did not know that. Fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.